Hello, I'm Jenya Delima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the podcast that takes a whole person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. Donna Levin has taught writing for over 3 decades, and she's authored both fictional novels and books on the craft of writing. And we're going to be addressing an important topic that's covered in one of those books. This is how to start your novel. Thanks for being here, Donna.
Thank you for having me.
When you are looking at helping someone and they're stuck and they don't know where to start, is there something that you always suggest, or do you have a one size fits all approach?
Believe it, I actually do have a one size fits all approach, which is just write something. It really doesn't matter what. And we can get into the specifics, or the writer can get into the
Mhm.
specifics after that. I go through this myself all the time. I think I sit down at the start, think, no, this isn't right. I've got to do it better. Someone else would do it better. This story has been told. This isn't a good beginning. This character doesn't make any sense. All those. So just write something. You can describe the room you're in. You can describe the cafe you're in. You can describe the sidewalk you're walking down. Of course, it's hard to write while you're walking on the sidewalk. And in fact, that's how I got into trouble. But just write something. That is the message I tell myself
Mhm.
and I tell other people, and then, go from there. I mean, of course, the advice to just write something doesn't take you through the whole book,
Right.
but it gets you past that stuck place.
Mhm. I mean, it seems so simple once you say it, but this is something even as an editor that I hear a lot from people where they're stuck on a certain thing, or maybe they're confused by the plot, or they aren't sure which direction to take their world building in. And then they let that stalling point become a stopping point. But, and this is something that you hear editors say all the time, I can't edit a blank page.
Right. Yes, you can. I think Grace Paley said you can rewrite anything but a blank page. And I have to remind myself of that frequently. In terms of the more practical aspect of starting a novel, if
Hmm.
you're thinking about starting a novel, you probably have an idea. And I suggest you just write down everything you know about that idea. It can't happen in your head. It has to happen on the page. And of course, these days, the page might just be this computer screen, and that's fine. I
Right.
work almost exclusively on a computer. But write down everything you know about what your idea is. And in the process, you'll get more ideas and you'll learn more about it. Again, I can't emphasize this enough, really. You're in your car, you're listening to Spotify, whatever, and the music is taking you to other beautiful places. And it's easy to sort of think that there's this sublime novel out there and it will just write itself, but it doesn't. It happens in the process of putting words down. You put it down, and then in the process, more comes to you, and you keep doing that. I mean, once you have everything written down that you've been thinking about, good chance that you'll have some ideas about maybe where you want to start. And remember, for now, where you start doesn't matter. I can tell you that, yes, you want to start at the beginning where the story starts, and you want to start with a
Hmm.
conflict. But, when we're talking about just getting started, it doesn't matter.
Do you think that's a common misconception that a lot of people have, and that might be why they have a hard time starting? That they do think it will be easier than it is, or that they have to start at a certain place?
Well, not only is it a common misconception, it's a misconception that I have. The only thing that keeps me going is the fantasy that the next book will be easier. It hasn't happened yet. And then, when a book really is finished, it looks like it was easy. And
Mm,
that's the goal. In my first writing book, Get That Novel Started, I said, you have to do as many drafts as you can stand without setting yourself on fire, and then one more. And
yes,
then
and
in my
that's advice you've updated.
And then, thank you. Okay, so you really have been reading it. 'Cause I updated it and Get That Novel Written and said it's two more. I was wrong. Um, I've been wrong before, probably just this morning. So a lot of and I've been maybe a little guilty of this myself with, Get That Novel Started. A lot of people kind of try to convince you that it's easy if you just follow these steps.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
isn't. It isn't. But if you want to do it, you want to do it. I mean, that's another thing that comes up for me a lot. People either get it or they don't. I was complaining maybe a little too much to a friend via email about how hard it was and how much trouble I was having. And he said, I don't see why you do it. If you're not enjoying it, why do you do it? Well, if you get it, then you know
Mm-hmm.
why you do it. So what I realized was I can't complain to him anymore. And I have to rely on the people I know who get it. And
Yeah.
they're never going to say, why don't you quit?
I'm glad you bring that up too. And this cycles over to another topic, which is author or writer community. And that we do a lot of the time have these same difficulties that we're going to encounter, and that they're almost universal, if not universal. But yeah, it's very important to make sure that you're talking to the right person who understands what that's like and doesn't have these easy breezy ideas of the author life where you sit down at your desk that is dappled in sunlight with a little flower in a vase on the end and you just sit down and
Yeah.
effortlessly write for 3 hours a day.
Yeah. See, when I first started writing, in a serious way, which was more years ago than I particularly care to announce. But then I started telling people that I was a writer, and that was important because it made me accountable.
Mm,
I wasn't going to go back to those same people in 6 months in, and okay, it was hard, But a couple of times people said, "Well, are you going to give yourself a certain amount of time to see if you make it?"
mm,
And what exactly is making it? And I think there are people who sit down and say, "Well, maybe I will be the next." I don't know, John Grisham or Emily Henry or whoever, the genre, king or queen of that genre.
mhm.
And I'm going to, and that happens to people and they make a big splash and they make a lot of money. I would love to make a big splash and I would love to make a lot of money, but, there's more to it than that. And also the other thing that drives me crazy, which is a long list, by the way. Go to college and then to law school for 3 years. Doctors go for a much longer time. And there's the thing with writing fiction is there are no barriers to entry. If you are adept at your native language, and more than one is great. I really only have one, but it's easy to think that, it's like writing a clever email, only longer.
Oh,
Um, and there are just really just as many skills involved.
mm-hmm.
I'm going to go out on a limb here as performing open heart surgery, but no one would burst into an emergency room and say, "I've always wanted to be a doctor. Hand me a scalpel." Um,
Well, hopefully not.
hopefully not. But you have to have an apprenticeship. You have to get feedback. I mean, we're back to the issue of community too, and finding a good community, a good supportive community, not one that's going to just give you empty praise,
Right.
but one that is going to give you honest feedback, but also, again, they get it. They get what you're doing. They get that what you're doing is important to you.
Well, that was something else that you'd said in other articles and interviews was the importance of that feedback and that you had to be also open-minded to that feedback, not already ready to defend yourself or say why you were doing this or that. That ability to take it in and really be able to pick it apart and see what's valuable and what's not, and also knowing what resonates with you and what doesn't.
I think that when people get feedback, when I get feedback, my first response is, but I think it's common, is either, "Oh, right, that's just what they said. I have to do that, change this, change this, and then it's perfect." Or, "These jerks just didn't understand what I was trying to do, so just reject it out of town and out of hand." And the truth is going to be somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
And the real value of feedback, for the most part, is some months and sometimes even longer down the line where, your characters really aren't that likable. How do you make them more likable? Or the story's too slow to start. How do I start it a little more quickly?
Mm-hmm.
And, but it's very much a process. Oh, yeah. And you see, it's also so darn subjective, and you're never going to please everybody
Oh,
with what you
exactly.
do. In fact, I think the more people you try to please, the fewer you'll please, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I
This
can
book is
see
for
that
everybody.
relationship, right? Right,
Yeah,
but you're really writing it for your mother or for your best friend or for your past self, and that's really your audience of one.
right, right, exactly.
Do you think that getting some of this feedback can help someone if they don't know how to start and they are stuck?
Yeah, I definitely do, actually. I think the problem with you've got to really be willing to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
And maybe somebody starting a novel would benefit from one-on-one coaching, rather than just throwing it out there to people who are also starting out. I mean, when I look at, with this last novel, when I look at the pages I turned out at the very beginning, they're just embarrassing. I'm just sadly not somebody who can just plot a book in advance. Many years ago, my dad, when I was writing my first novel, said, "Donna, I just don't understand. Why don't you just make an outline?" And
Oh no.
I didn't really know what to say. Now, what I should have said, but I didn't have the language at the time, or I didn't have couldn't articulate it at the time, was I don't know enough about novel writing to make an outline in advance. Um, and if you can make an outline, great. Don't expect to stick to it.
Yes,
Things are
exactly.
things are going to change.
Or beat yourself up if you don't write an outline ahead of time too, because I've seen authors where that works splendidly either way. Those people that
Yeah.
completely pants it, and then the people that meticulously outline every single thing.
At the risk of generalizing, I think that outlining in advance is going to work better for people who are writing in very niche genres, romance or mystery, and also been writing for a very long time.
So we brought up plot, but what are some of the concepts or elements of the story that readers or authors rather should be aware of or already have in place before they start?
Well, I know one of your recent interviewees and he was talking about the specificity of language and how important
Yes,
that is,
definitely. Yep.
and using the fewest words you need. One of my little pet peeves is when people use the word great for everything. It's a great way. You see it in advertising a lot. Words like great and good and beautiful and ugly and terrible are just very general words. So, and everybody has their own writing style, but I think whether it's just practice and getting feedback or some kind of self-education, you have to have some mastery of language. It doesn't mean you have to be right. In fact, I don't like academic writing particularly, but you've got to be able to put a sentence together.
Yes.
And then, of course, dialogue. And for that, I suggest people eavesdrop. Dialogue simulates real speech, but it's not real speech.
Great.
So it's going to be, if you've ever read a court transcript or a therapy session, whatever, people just digress and they repeat themselves. I repeat myself a lot, or interrupt themselves and change the subject. I do that a lot too. So you want to capture those behaviors,
Hmm.
but condense them, in a short way. And then I think also one can draw on one's heritage and just one's family. I know that, my family of origin had certain quirks of speaking. My aunt would stop before she finished a sentence once she'd gotten her message across. So I drew on that, but everybody has their own family history. One thing I learned the hard way is be careful about spelling out mispronunciations. If somebody has an accent, there are other ways to imply that rather than, misspelling words to get
Right.
that across. And character. Wow. I recommend a lot of homework on characters. Write a biography of the character, for example. But then after you write this fantastic, compelling 10-page biography of your heroine, and you think, oh, this would make a good prologue. We need to know everything about how she got to be where she is. And you don't. It's for
Hmm.
you. If there's anything that needs to come up, it'll just come up naturally in the writing, in the story. You can have fun with it too. Like there's a list of questions you can ask. You can have a standard list of questions that, you know, about what this person looks like, what this
Hmm.
person believes, and the most important part, what does this person want? What are
Yes.
this person's goals? And so when you're stuck on the plot, go back to what the characters want.
Yes, that is excellent
Yeah.
advice because that is something that I see sometimes happen in manuscripts too, where the character doesn't have a defined want or a defined goal. And so then you don't really have a reason for why things are happening because so much really is going to center around that. And then that will be what they base their decisions on.
And then you can't move the plot forward. And I'll say passive characters are less interesting than active characters, characters who are acted upon.
Yes, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
if we go back to people who are still debating how to start a novel, have you ever heard lists of excuses that they've given for why they can't or why they feel they can't?
Yes, I hear them sometimes in my own brain. Um, it's, I'm going to wait till my job gets less stressful, till the kitchen remodel is finished, till the kids start school, till the kids graduate,
Mhm.
till, my husband quits his job, till, and there will never be a good time to write.
Yeah.
There'll never be an easy time to write. And time slips away much more too quickly. So I recognize them as excuses, and then just have to decide whether or not it's a priority for you. The other thing, as far as writing goes, especially starting a novel, creating a writing practice.
Mm.
Yes, you do have to write every day, or a short time is fine, but you have to write every day because that's for one, reason. That's how you keep all those details in your head. If one has ever read a long book and said, well, how did the author remember all these names and all these details and everything? The way they did it was by working on it every day. And then it's plugged into your brain. And when you're not working, the ideas come to you when you're in the shower, when you're taking a walk, and you think, oh, yes, that's how I solved this problem, or this is the detail I want to add. So the daily work is really important. It might be different for other forms of writing, whether it's short stories or poetry, but for a novel, every day, every
So
day.
what does your daily writing practice then look like?
Well, it's changed a lot over the years. I will say when I started, I had the luxury. I would get up and go swimming and get coffee. And the coffee would get me to sit down at what was a very, by our standards today, extremely primitive computer. It was an IBM display writer. And then I'd write for 3 hours or so, and people would say, what do you do the rest of the day? I just, somehow that took the whole day, and then I had kids, and it became a sort of a different thing entirely. But I still, as best I could, kept to the daily, not when they were babies, but when they went to school, and that happened rather quickly. Just, and by that time, I had a better computer, and there was internet. Then once they were out of the house, I had that time that was, that I could take a couple of hours now with kids, as any parent will tell you. I mean, then there are interruptions that you just can't avoid. So there is a big balancing act that takes place. Let's see. So the now I'll be honest and say now I actually have the luxury of too much time, and you can have too much time,
Mm.
and I can sit down and say, well, I've got all afternoon. What's the big rush? Oh,
Oh,
here's
yeah.
YouTube. And I tell students, turn off the Wi-Fi.
Oh,
But you might have to bleep this out. I never turn off the Wi-Fi, but I should, but I never do.
well, before we end, you had a book that just recently came out. If you'd like to share a little bit about that with us.
I would love to. It's such a good cover. Peekaboo. It was published by Skyhorse's Arcade Input Print. And yeah, it's a wraparound cover. Love that. Quote from Karen Joy Fowler on the front, and Lamont on the back. And it's about four women who get a hold of a talking stick, and a talking stick may or may not have some magical powers. I'll leave it at that for now. On my website, there are links to buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org. And of course, it's widely available at libraries. I'm not trying to take your money. You can get it at your local library and or your local independent bookstore.
And do you have any parting advice for our listeners that we haven't already covered?
I would reiterate, don't wait, start now. I was at a writers' conference a couple of years ago where the median age was was over 60, and mostly women, of course, and they all regretted not starting sooner. So don't wait.
Oh, thank you again. And thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes for additional information, where we'll also have all of Donna's links. And then please join me next week when Elizabeth Sharp McKetta will be here, and she'll be explaining how you can use myths and fairy tales to reclaim your life story in memoir form. Thanks again.